working at that intersection. So we have over 400 nonpartisan organizations all across the country that participate in the coalition in a reach of over 1,700 campuses across the country. I'll talk a little bit more about our organizing model shortly, but just want to say we really exist to support you all and to help provide any and all resources and tools that you could possibly need to be successful in this work. Thank you, Virtus.
All right, thank you. Part of and one of the things that we have benefited from was that support. That was both in terms of grants, in terms of funding, also in terms of being a clearinghouse for resources and organizations as well, for partnership purposes. So thank you for that. Now, so Cal, All-In Challenge.
It would be my pleasure, Virtus. Hi, everyone. Good to see you. My name is Kat. I'm Managing Director of the All-In Challenge, as Virtus was kind enough to let you know already. Many of you are already participating about the All-In Challenge, or I've talked with you at length about it already, but just in a nutshell, the All-In Campus Democracy Challenge is a nonpartisan nonprofit initiative out of Civic Nation that supports and recognizes colleges working to improve civic learning, democratic engagement, and voter participation. So we're currently working with more than 600 institutions across the country to support and also kind of recognize and provide structure around improving student voting rates and civic learning, and really institutionalizing that democratic engagement work. In brief, when it came to convene a campus-wide working group to join the National Study of Learning, Voting, and Engagement to measure their student voting and registration rates, develop and implement a democratic engagement action plan. And our team provides support and coaching and resources to get those things accomplished. We then provide seals, awards, and recognition to campuses in different categories based on these results. So I'm happy to provide more information about the program, but really excited to be on this call today and support your work. Thanks a lot.
Great, and I just was putting some links in the chat, and feel free to do that as well. Feel free to chat in the chat, and also feel free to raise your hand or interject if you have any questions as well. And so Connie, tell us about what special award you won with the All-In.
Yeah. I'm really excited to be here, first off. It's nice to see real people. Somebody said something about having adult conversations, and I don't have kids, so that's not my problem, but it's having conversations that's my problem, so I'm thrilled to be here. Anyway, we joined All-In Challenge at a CLDE meeting I attended. Seems like 100 years ago, but I can't remember. And they encouraged us and provided guidance to do our first action plan. And we won the award in 2017 for the best action plan, which was kind of the nicest surprise I'd ever received. I'll never forget when Kat called me. It was like, but anyway, and one of my student interns was on the student honor roll for All-In Challenge this year. So we're really excited about that as well. And that's really motivating, I think, all these awards and so on that All-In provides. So we've also, just to add on to that, this year we were a platinum campus for our voter turnout rate. So again, it's something to aspire to. I get to put that little thing on my office door and put it on the website and everything. So it's great stuff, you guys. Really great stuff. That's all.
All right, great. So, and just mind you that you are a community college that's in Charlottesville, North Carolina, and
Charlottesville, Virginia.
Charlottesville. Did I say North Carolina? I'm seeing Irving, and I'm thinking Charlotte, North Carolina.
No.
Okay, yeah, I should not have skipped lunch. Now, but and so Charlottesville, Virginia, and we know what happened about almost 3 years ago now, and that August. So, and then the following year, you know, having to then, you know, get out the vote with all of that going on. I'm sure that that really impacted your plan.
It totally changed the environment on campus and the openness among faculty and staff to do civic engagement work. So, I mean, it was a shock. Our students came back, our faculty came back to campus that fall, having just gone through this Unite the Right rally, and everybody was kind of, well, shocked. We didn't quite know where to go. We didn't know how to talk about it. So we had to have a lot of discussions about not only how to talk about this with our students in classes, but how we were going to, I hate to put it this way, but use this to engage students more in the elections. So it was a horrible experience, but it really guided our planning from that point out.
Yeah. So, this takes us to some of the resources that I'm sure that you're able to use, and in order to gain success, and that success was having above a national average in your voter turnout. Mm-hmm. That if my memory serves me correctly, and for it to almost double between the midterm. So first of all, I know that Student Law Student Vote Coalition has something that gives you a basic framework to at least to start off with, and then you can add in, so like a skeleton, mm-hmm. and then you put in the meat, right?
Absolutely.
And that is LEAP, right?
Right.
And Clarissa, if you can tell us about that,
yeah,
that'd be great.
I'm happy to. So I mentioned we started the coalition in February of 2016, and just to give a little bit of background on why we started this, many of you might know that the Higher Education Act does require colleges and universities to provide voter registration for their students. In 2014, we saw one of the lowest turnout elections in years, and so after that, many of us in the nonpartisan student voting space came together and said, well, this is already an HE. We would love to see more campuses doing this. It's not being enforced. Not a lot of campuses actually were at the time. So we wanted to develop some sort of framework that campuses could use and take and own and make their own as a way to do voter engagement in a very thoughtful and strategic way. So we came up with the SLSB Checklist, which we also refer to as the LEAP process for institutionalization. It is simply lead, engage, assess, and plan. So I'll walk through that really quickly. First, lead. So we think that all of these efforts at a macro level should start with having an identified local campus leader who takes on the responsibility for making sure that their entire campus community is welcomed into the voting process and registered and educated, and that is someone who is a faculty member or a staff member of the campus, so that it's someone who is embedded within the institution, knows the community, is there for the long term. Once that person is identified and makes that commitment, we then move to the step of engage. So we know that this work is hard. No one person can do all of this work alone, though maybe Connie can because she's a superstar. I think she can do anything. But it's really helpful to build on-campus coalitions. So we then recommend bringing together faculty from all different areas of study, staff from across the campus and in different areas, students, local nonprofits, and also local election officials to build an on-campus coalition that's centered around this work. The next step then is assess, which we really encourage campuses, as Kat mentioned, to sign up for the National Study of Learning, Voting, and Engagement as a way to really assess what your campus's registration and turnout rates are. So you know where the gaps are, you know where you can possibly go, what kind of goals could be attainable for your campus. So that third piece is assess. And then the fourth is planning. So we then actually, as Kat mentioned, and as this whole conversation is about today, then move to the step of actually writing what we call a democratic engagement action plan that lays out everything, how you are going to register your students to vote, educate them about the process, mobilize them to turn out, and also make sure that they have access to the voting process. So again, this is sort of the macro level that we think campuses should really start at, of leading, engaging, assessing, and planning.
And Verdis, if I can just chime in here, Clarissa, I think that was such a good explanation of the steps. And everyone should know that the All-In Challenge is a proud member of the SLSV Coalition, and that the model of All-In's program was in many ways based on that SLSV checklist. So the thinking that the coalition is doing around these different steps really are helping out organizations like the All-In Challenge and other nonpartisan nonprofits to kind of align our work and streamline the work as campuses are kind of going through it and providing support in an organized way. So thank you to the coalition for kind of building out that structure that other organizations and campuses can follow to create so much success like Connie has done at PVCC.
Yes, agreed. And that's a great segue into because once you have the leader, you have the engagement, and then you have the assessment, and various tools for that. And the last time we talked about, we had Adam Grismondi from the Institute of Democracy in Higher Ed on the last call walk us through NSOLV, and then a campus that utilize that data to then to inform their plans and their targets, and to almost 50% voter participation, and that was a New Jersey campus. Then this checklist. And I think we've all been influenced by it. But I think in order to be a part of the coalition, you have to do it. But anyway.
Yeah, I mean, that is the one requirement, the checklist.
Right.
Pretty low.
But then when you get to the planning part, it's not like, okay, the planning is done. Okay, all we have to do is just plan, right? It's a little bit more complicated than just sitting down and planning something. And I wish it were easier than that. But there's a lot of things to take into consideration, and that's part of the planning stage as well. And there are many different organizations out that region-specific targeted marginalized groups and things like that. And you have some that are specific to higher ed and for higher ed and are specialized in this has worked in higher ed and this could work, or how can we work with higher ed is really, because we're all kind of going along with the times, they're changing. So, and one of them is the All-In Challenge, and so I would like to invite Kat to tell us about one of the resources that was part of the coalition. A coalition has helped, but they really are the champions of this document. So, and really utilizing it well on its now almost 600 campuses now.
Yeah, there are more than 600 campuses in the challenge now. And Verdes, I think, so you're referring to the Strengthening American Democracy Guide.
I am.
Which was really a collaborative effort of several different SLSV coalition members and the coalition team itself. Those other members included the Campus Vote Project out of the Fair Election Center, American Democracy Project. Verdes was involved in his former role, and a few other organizations have really been involved in kind of putting in. And the full name is the Strengthening American Democracy Guide, a guide for developing an action plan to increase civic learning, political engagement, and voting rates among college students. So it's a mouthful. We often just refer to it as Strengthening American Democracy. This guide really, the audience is campus administrators, faculty, and students who are working with a team of stakeholders to create a sort of strategic vision and set goals around their democratic engagement efforts. So when campuses participate in the challenge, we encourage them to draft a democratic engagement plan every 2 years. So it would be in advance of every midterm election and presidential election. All elections are important, but we kind of work on a 2-year cycle. And utilizing this guide, we ask them to draft a plan to kind of describe what they're doing. So the plan, we encourage them to kind of include a description of their leadership and sort of the team involved in these programs on campus, what the commitment of the institution looks like, so how the president, how important stakeholders are sort of communicating how the campus is committed to this work, doing a landscape analysis, which looks at campus climate and looks at the national study of learning, voting, and engagement results, and kind of what things look like on a campus, where the starting point is, what has worked and not worked in the past, setting goals, both short-term and long-term, in the plan, and especially looking again at NSOLV data around voting registration and voting rates, around sort of looking at different demographic groups and looking at inequities and disparities in different student participation and working towards closing those gaps and making their efforts more inclusive. Then taking a look at the strategy section, which would be kind of a description of the institutional efforts, the activities and tactics that are involved in voter registration, voter education, and voter turnout. So what the strategy is there. And then finally, looking at both reporting, which would be kind of a description of how a campus is communicating with other stakeholders about what they're doing on the ground. So how are you reaching the students with your student voting rate data? How are you communicating this plan to the different departments on campus, so that everyone is aware of what's going on and can all be on the same page and contribute to a unified mission? And finally, an evaluation. So how are you thinking through how your efforts can be improved year over year? This should be a continuous process. And so the cycle kind of starts again. And so these are the different sort of sections that are laid out in the Strengthening American Democracy Guide. It includes guiding questions in each of these sections. So if you kind of look through the guide and answer some of those key questions, you will have a very strong place that you can kind of start from and continue to improve. There is also a Strengthening American Democracy rubric that is available on the SLSV's, the coalition's website. It's also available on the All-In Challenge website under our resource hub, which I'll share out on the group chat. This guide allows campuses to self-assess how their plan is and what might need to be strengthened and improved. Another thing that our team does is we have 2 deadlines, an early deadline, which was in December of 2019, and then we are asking campuses participating in the challenge to submit action plans, and our team reads through them, and then other coalition partners also review them. We provide scoring against the rubric, and then written feedback on all of these different parts of your action plan, and provide that feedback and those scores to campuses so that people can, the writers of the things can be strengthened where they might not have thought of certain aspects that they want to improve upon, and then submit a final draft. So it is an iterative process. Action plans are often living documents, but there are some really solid resources that Unchallenge uses to guide these practices. And Connie has an incredible plan, has written incredible plans in the past, award-winning plans, as she mentioned. So she, I'm sure, would have some excellent insights.
Yeah, you know, one of the things these guides are really good for, and they're fabulous, is getting the students engaged in doing it. Because most of my students that I work with I say, let's make a plan. They're like, how? And so this has been a great way to get my students to learn how to make a plan and engagement in the plan. Because, you know, I'm an old woman. I don't know what students want. I don't, you know, it's much better to have them involved. And these plans, again, they really give them the opportunity to do it themselves. On the group chat, there is a link to other campus plans, and that has been incredibly helpful to me, to go on not having to reinvent the wheel, to go in and be able to look at what other campuses have done and then adapt that to what I can do at my school. Some things can't be adapted, but they're really great ideas, and it's really inspiring to read that too. So yeah, this is good stuff. And it also, as Vertus mentioned, we have a 5-year plan now that engages the entire college in civic engagement. And these action plans really guided the way we developed that 5-year plan. So it's really, doing this process has been just invaluable to our campus.
All right, great. Thank you, and thank you all for your insight, as well as sharing your resources and how you use the resources that are there. We have quite a few people on the call today, and so I just want to really just open it up for you to share. If you have done an action plan, I would say raise your hand, but I can't see everybody. But if you have done an action plan, what stage that you're on, it doesn't matter if you have completed it or you haven't even thought to have done one. Just share with us, see where you're at, and especially now, what questions you have about, like, maybe is it even worth it to even start one now, you know, with everything going on? And I'll say yes. But yes, and Kat says yes as well. Yes, it is good to start. Maybe it'll be good distraction too, you know, the idle hands and all that great stuff. But any questions? Any questions? I'm gonna stop talking now.
I guess I can kind of go. So I'm Bailey. I'm from Lesley University in Cambridge, Mass. And prior to this year, our voting initiatives have kind of been low/non-existent. I'm student body vice president through our undergraduate student government, and that organization has done tabling for voter registration and things like that, but it wasn't specifically dedicated towards voter engagement. And so this year, in the past semester, so we've really had kind of an increase in the interest in creating an initiative and really establishing what will work and what will not work, and really making civic engagement more of just accessible on campus and making it something that people are aware of, things like that. So I guess just kind of a general question. I am not at the forefront of that. There's actually a first-year student who's really, really passionate about this, and that's been amazing. So I guess the question that I would personally have is, what has worked at other institutions as far as actually engaging students? We are a highly a commuter school. There aren't a lot of students necessarily just lingering around places. So we've tried tabling, but we're not sure if that's necessarily the most effective method, or if there are others that have proven to be more engaging and more successful.
Really,
so I guess that's
really, I'm at a commuter school too. I'm a community college, and you're right, it's really hard to get in some place to do anything, especially if you wanted to come back after dinner,
yes.
right? But one thing, we have almost a constant presence in the student center. So it takes a lot of resources, but it's almost constant, at least during the high traffic times. We do a lot of social media, and we really work to have this information given out by faculty in classes. That's really, if you get the faculty engaged, and it's a really hard process, believe me, I know, I'm still working on it. But if students are taught by their faculty, or that this is what you need to do and this is how you need to do it, that goes a long way. The other thing is, we are now doing a voting module in our student development class, that, first year experience class. All students have to go through that class, and all students will then be exposed to modules about how to vote, why to vote, how to register, when the next election is, and all that kind of stuff. So I'm looking at that being very helpful to getting people to register. But you're right, it's so hard on a community campus.
And I think that's one thing that, I'm sorry. But I think that's one thing that, strengthening American democracy guide does, is it does take that into consideration. Students are the community. Well, maybe not have a bunch of, debate night watch parties, because it might not grab not a lot of students. May not be able to. So how to then plan around that, still engagement, or do it for people to reflect and things like that. It's so the planning, it really can take that into consideration.
Well,
and really help that.
At the risk of beating
effort.
a dead horse, the faculty have to be engaged in this. If they aren't talking to their students about it, you're just a voice in the wilderness. So it's got to be a campus-wide effort. And a lot of that requires support from on high. Means you need support from the administration.
So I have a question for you, Connie.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, along those lines, what part of the process did you engage faculty? Before the planning, after the planning, because there's like this.
Primarily, it was after the planning, because up until the last couple of years, I've been that voice in the wilderness. But particularly after the Unite the Right rally, faculty were all over it. They really saw up close and personal how important this stuff is. Now I have a committee that's probably, I think it's 15 people, and I'm sure 12 of them are faculty working on the planning for this.
Yeah, hi everyone. So my name's Jamie Willer. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I also am at Lesley University in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I work with Bailey very closely. I'm a full-time staff member, so I oversee our Office of Community Service, and I came to my position over the summer, and this was immediately, I was familiar with Campus Compact's work, and I immediately wanted to bring this to Lesley. But it has been a challenge, because I think before it was in our student activities, and it was solely the undergraduate student government. doing, some efforts around voter registration, but it hadn't really been institutionalized at all. And so I think that student interest has been really helpful to bring it into my office and to be able to really connect it to our broader civic engagement efforts across campus beyond just voter engagement. But the question that I have is, there's obviously a lot that we could do, and there's a lot of resources out there, and also just being mindful of the timeline and kind of like where things are at and what we need to do in the timeline that we need to do them. What would you all recommend, we prioritize? I'm a one-person office, and I am the only full-time staff that I would say is committed to really wanting to make this happen on campus. There's a lot of faculty that I could easily see being very interested in wanting to spread the word with their students and to support myself and the other student leaders who want to make this happen. We actually have a first-year seminar course that's going to have a course assistant who's working with the Community Engaged Learning Project. The students are going to be able to do voter engagement efforts on campus and plan their own organizing initiatives to try to raise awareness as part of their course, just because I have a faculty member and a student who particularly asked to do that. But we're trying to figure out, how do we work towards institutionalization, but in a timeline that makes sense considering how close we are to everything. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'll just jump in here to say, just know that you don't have to do everything all at once, and that it might seem overwhelming. Like I mentioned, there's 400 groups in the space. There's a ton of different things to organize around, from National Voter Registration Day to the new Vote Early Day that launched just a couple weeks ago, and Election Day. You don't have to do it all. This is a process. It takes time. It takes a lot of iteration. And in the Strengthening American Democracy Guide, I think there's two helpful things in that helps to get at your question. And one, goals. So think about what's feasible for you with what resources you have and the team that you have available to you now for the short term, and that might be through this election cycle. But where do you want to be within the next 3 to 5 years? What would you like to see institutionalized on your campus? It also lays out in there the process of thinking through what those resources are that you currently have available to you, and what the landscape is currently on your campus, specifically to your campus that you might face. And I think all of that you have to sort of take into account and know that this is work for the long term, right? This is not just for this election, just for this year, and just remember that.
Thank you, that's really helpful. I appreciate that.
I think that's really important to keep in mind, because elections come very quickly in the semester, right? You get back to school at the end of August, registration deadlines in October sometime, you barely get time to plan it and over, and then you got to do all the get out the vote work. It seems like there's a whole lot to do in a really short space. And like we just heard, it's really important to think what you can do now, but that long-term goal, that 4 years from now, you're going to be already planning in the spring how you're going to do it in the fall. That's what I would keep in mind, because it does get really frustrating really fast. But it sounds like you're on top of it.
I want to mention that this is a really great questions. The last that we have received the last two, because I think that a lot of schools are get overwhelmed, rightfully so, by the amount of information, the amount of even organizations that want to get involved and support commuter students, commuter schools, or even like schools with a large racially demographic student population. And I think that I just want to highlight the importance of starting small and envisioning how that might change in 5 years. And, creating a plan is very helpful with that, particularly when there are different people that can support your campus. But I want to mention that highlight the importance of getting faculty involved. That is very key. But then two, getting start forming a coalition on your campus from other colleagues, apart from faculty that might be in student involvement, might be working with orientation, might be working with transfer students. That is very key. Our campuses here in North Carolina, thinking about primarily commuter students, since that has been the focus of our conversation in the last 10 minutes or so. Central Piedmont Community College up in Mecklenburg County, Durham Tech in Durham County have done an amazing job, and they have even tapped into the early college, something that perhaps did not kind of cross our mind on the first early stages of this process. They're the ones that are bringing up all these ideas, and now we have Dunk Nathan up in the as part of Spring Fling. So get information and try to get a shot at Duncan Nathan. So I think know what worked better for them at that particular time, that particular community, and so we can let that momentum go. We need to kind of maximize that potential from our student leaders, while also utilizing our community partners and
I do have one question. What have you seen lately that has been like really innovative in terms of actually actually composing a plan? Like, what are some innovative ways that some people have gone to do that? Yeah.
So I want to jump in here with another resource, and I'm going to put this in the chat. At the top of the call, Vertus mentioned that through the SLSV Coalition, one of the things that we do for our partners and campuses is give out sub-grants. Coming out of one of our post-election summits, some of our partners had an idea to create a gamification of the Strengthening American Democracy Guide, which resulted in our partners from Democracy Works and the Maryland Institute College of Art working together to create this tool called Votes and Ballots. It's a really fun way, especially if it's involved in the planning process, and it really takes, there's two parts to it. So it kind of takes the Strengthening American Democracy Guide and turns it into like a Mad Lib style sort of fill in the blank, forget exactly, action planning guide. And then there's a strategy poster with tactic cards that are specific to voter registration, voter education, institutionalizing the work, and voter mobilization. And it's just a really interactive way to do the action planning. And we've supported a number of campuses and statewide networks in hosting statewide summits, and this is often one of the key this back the campus coalition and do this together as a way to really inform the writing of your action plan.
I want to +1 that point about votes and ballots. As someone who has played it a number of times and helped facilitate it at various state summits, it is a very helpful tool, and it makes action planning fun and accessible, a little less intimidating. I think the Strengthen American Democracy Guide is great. It's a wealth of information, but it can be quite dense. I think action planning. So this is a great way to, as Claire said, involve students and make it a little bit more fun and accessible as a starting point.
For what it's worth, my students who have played it a couple of times at going to conferences is playing Votes and Ballots. So,
so we have a question in the chat about recommendations to promote and support absentee voter registration. And as far as, I mean, and also taking that into consideration, because some people forget about that when planning. I mean, especially at four-year institutions where the majority of the students are not local, are residential, and may have homes other places, and are registered in other places. I know that some states, you know, try to block students from voting as well. And we have been largely organizing against that, to make sure that all students have the right to vote. But the absentee ballot and voting, especially as Rich, as you said, in our current conditions, and also I want to also lift up the other innovative ways of engaging people now, especially I see Tavita brought up DJ Nice. We can end with that, but Clarissa or Kat, any recommendations for resources that can inform action planning around absentee ballots and voting?
I'm happy to jump in on this one. So the SLSB Coalition, along with Kat's organization, the All-In Campus Democracy Challenge, the Campus Vote Project, who runs the Voter Friendly Campus designation, and NASPA, we are all part of what's called the National Resource Consortium for Full Student Voter Participation. It's a very long name, so we simplify it by just calling it Ask Every Student. I just put the website in there. It's pretty simple premise around this work. This just goes back to some traditional organizing principles that the best way to ballot is to get 3 to 5 minutes of individualized focus of their time. And so for the course of the past year, we've been working together with partners to study campuses that do this really well. So campuses like Northwestern or Stony Brook University that have voter registration rates of their students that are higher than 90%, who often also integrate absentee voting in with that as well. What they do is integrate this into processes that the campuses already have. So think of integrating these into orientation processes, or as Connie mentioned, into classes that all first-year students have to take. So this initiative supports campuses as they want to do this for themselves, and helps them to identify the different processes that might be right for their own campus and how to do this. Additionally, I did want to make a comment on absentee voting or voting by mail as well. I was remiss to mention that the Students Learn, Students Vote Coalition is now housed at the National Conference on Citizenship. And one of our senior fellows that is there now is someone named Dana Chisnell, who is a founder of the Center for Civic Design and has been working on vote by mail for the past couple of decades. And she just right before this hosted a webinar on vote by mail in light of Corona, and shared some really interesting things about what it would actually take to sort of move to that system. And one of the things that I want to highlight and make sure that everyone on campuses know, because this question has come up a lot, especially for students in the primaries, if they've had to move off campus. The best bet is to local election officials as soon as possible and request another ballot, because what we're finding, and I don't know if this is true across the board, but for many states, it's not legal to forward election mail. So students need to get on top of that right away if that is a concern, or you have primaries or local elections in your states coming up that students may have already requested an absentee ballot for at their campus address.
Thanks for lifting that up. Absolutely.
Clarissa, I have a question. Was that conversation recorded? I'd love to listen to it, but I wasn't able to make it.
It was, yeah. Yeah. I don't exactly know how to tell you to find it, but I will make sure that you get it.
Thank you. We would love to share it in North Carolina as well, and with
Great.
the combat.
Yeah.
All right, so we have about a couple more minutes left. Does anybody else have a question that they would like to ask or anything they'd like to share as anything that has worked for you or has or anything like that? If you do, please you can put it either in the chat or email us afterwards, and we can share it as a resource as well. Feel free to continue this conversation with us, as well as to any other resources that you think that you found helpful in your planning or that you come across. Share that as well. That'll be very, very helpful to see what's going on out there and who's doing what, and who knows, we probably already know them. but if we don't, hey, we can bring them in. Let's go. So last but not least, I just want to leave. Does anybody, one of our three guests, have any last thought that they want to say or regarding action planning?
Thanks again for having us, Ferris. This was such a good conversation. Just wanted to say that our team at the All-In Challenge is here to kind of walk through writing a plan. We can do one-on-one conversations. We can give feedback on the plans. So just know that they don't have to be perfect when you submit them or get in touch. The idea is that they're works in progress that we're happy to collaborate with you on. So, you know, I know a lot of plans are going to have to be changed and revamped because of the current situation, and our team is here to help with that too. We'll be publishing a new webpage with COVID-19 resources, some of what to do with action planning, I think later this week or next week. So keep an eye out for that. And if you have any resources that you think could be added to that page, feel free to let me know. We're still kind of gathering the most useful resources to share with campuses. Thanks again, Meredith. And thanks for all the work, everybody on the call. Really important.
And next week's, and the next one will be April 8th, and we're going to be talking about how to turn student registrants into voters. And so we're going to have Manny Wren from Student Perks, talking about the New Voters Project. Mike Dean from Lead MN, who is Minnesota, and the work that they're doing there across the state, and as well as a case study from Kirkwood Community College in Iowa, from David McMahon and Fitz Greenwood, about how they do it in Iowa. So join us for that. And again, thank you, and hang in there in solidarity.
Thanks, Vertus. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Vertus.
Until next time.
Bye.
Thank you.